My stance on this is when a firefighter comes up to a hydrant, we expect there's going to be water. We don't control the water supply. Our firefighters are there to protect lives and property and to make sure that we're properly trained and equipped. That's my position on this. So if there's no water, I don't know how the water gets to the hydrants.
Why did 3 fires start at the same time in separate places? Why were the hydrants without water? Why were the fireworks exactly in the most investigated region of Hollywood? If you think for yourself, you've already seen that this is not a coincidence, but rather a file burning to save the skin of Diddy, Jay-Z, and other Hollywood powerhouses. And to prove it even further, in this video, you will hear the story of Samantha Blake, who has worked as a firefighter for over 10 years in Los Angeles, and she proves that this is all very strange. And take advantage and subscribe to the channel to receive more videos like this, and leave your comment. What do you think of all this? Was this fire forged or something natural? Here is what she said.
As a firefighter, one of the few certainties we have in our work is that when we arrive at a hydrant, there will be water. No matter what chaos is happening, no matter how dangerous the situation, we trust that the tools and the system will work. This confidence is what allows us to step into scenarios that most people would never imagine. And I never thought that trust could be shaken until that night. My job is to save lives, protect property, and be prepared for the unexpected. But that day, the unexpected wasn't just a burning house or an out-of-the-ordinary emergency. It was something no one in the barracks could predict. I'm not going to lie, I was shaken before I even arrived at the scene. From the moment I received the call, there was something strange in the air. And this feeling that something was out of place only increased when we got out of the truck in front of Diddy's mansion. I always thought that the world, despite its problems, was governed by a basic order. Good things happen when people do what is right. It was a simple belief, but it guided me on the most difficult days. However, that night, that belief was ripped from me. What I experienced there, in that place, still keeps me awake at night. It wasn't just a question of equipment or training. It was as if everything I believed about my work, about my purpose, was being challenged head-on. And the hardest part? Knowing that I still don't understand everything that happened. That day, we had just returned from a huge fire in Los Angeles. It was the kind of operation that completely drains you, body, mind, and soul. We spent hours fighting the flames, and even though we knew we had managed to control the worst, there were still small pockets of flames burning, as a reminder that the work is never truly over. Once we returned to the barracks, it finally felt like we could breathe. The atmosphere was lighter, and the team relaxed as best they could, exchanging jokes, organizing equipment, enjoying that rare moment of calm after the chaos. But the calm didn't last long. The alarm went off again, and the message that came over the radio took us straight to the opposite extreme of our state of mind. It was a fire in one of the largest properties in the city, a mansion on the edge of the municipality. As soon as I heard the address, something hooked me. It wasn't just any place. It was Diddy's mansion. Yes, that Diddy. I didn't need to meet him in person to know who he was. Celebrities, gigantic parties, luxury cars. He was the kind of person everyone knows, but few really understand. And of course, there were the rumors, the things people whisper but never say out loud. Even with all the adrenaline that came with the call, that name kept ringing in my head. Diddy. Why him? Why now? We didn't have time to think about it much because work calls us, and the routine begins, putting on the equipment, loading the truck, and leaving. But deep down, something was wrong. It wasn't just me. I could see it in the air. My colleagues, usually full of energy and chatter on the way to the scene, were strangely quiet. Some exchanged looks, as if they were thinking the same thing as me, but didn't have the courage to say it out loud. I tried to ignore this knot in my stomach, convincing myself it was just the weight of a long day and a call to a notorious location. But as we got closer to the property, this feeling only got worse. I couldn't explain it, but something that night was different. Something I couldn't see yet, but I could already feel. When the truck slowed and we arrived at the entrance to the property, something inside me stirred. I expected to see smoke in the sky, hear the sound of flames consuming the structure, smell the distinctive smell of burning wood. But there was only silence. A heavy, uncomfortable silence, the kind that makes your instincts scream that something is wrong. The mansion was immense, an impressive sight even in the dim light of night. But at that moment it seemed more gloomy than grand. There was no sign of fire or emergency. It was as if we were in a scenario frozen in time, waiting for something that hadn't yet begun. I looked at my colleagues as we got out of the truck. They were as confused as I was. One of them even checked the address on the radio to make sure we were in the right place, and the confirmation only increased the discomfort. "It's here for sure," they said. But if it was here, where was the fire? Where were the people running out? Where was the chaos typical of such a call? Then I saw him. My supervisor was standing near the gate, holding a clipboard and watching us with an expression that made no sense. He didn't seem worried or rushed, like you'd expect from someone in charge in an emergency. In fact, he was too calm. It seemed to be waiting for us. When I approached, still confused, I asked directly, "Where is the fire? What is happening here?" His response left me paralyzed. "The fire is about to start." He said it as if it were something as certain as the sunrise, without any emotion, without any urgency. I stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. "What do you mean, about to start?" "There's no fire here," I insisted, my voice starting to rise. He looked at me with the same calmness, as if he already knew I wouldn't understand. "Wait and see," was all he said. Before I could ask anything else, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw a group of men coming towards the house. They didn't look like employees or residents. They were dressed simply, but their expressions were hard and their movements deliberate. Each carried a large container, and as they approached, the strong smell of oil filled the air. They walked past us without saying a word, walking straight into the mansion as if they knew exactly what to do. I stood there, frozen, as I tried to process what was happening. None of this made sense. There was no fire, but everything around us seemed to be preparing for something that had not yet begun. The silence around was almost deafening, and that feeling that something was deeply wrong only grew. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand what was happening. But as I looked at my supervisor, I realized that whatever the truth was, he wasn't willing to share it. We were standing there, at the entrance to the mansion, when everything changed. First, it was an almost imperceptible sound, a slight tremor that I felt in my feet. I looked around, thinking maybe it was my imagination. But then there was a louder crack. It was the ground. It began to move, as if something huge was being activated beneath us. It was slow at first, but it soon became clear. The land in front of the mansion was opening up. We all took a few steps back, watching in disbelief as a massive opening appeared before our eyes. It was a tunnel, but not an ordinary tunnel. There was nothing rudimentary or improvised there. The walls were perfectly smooth, as if they had been shaped by high-precision machines. There were recessed lights, soft and even, illuminating the interior with a yellowish light. It was surreal. It didn't feel like something done hastily or in secret. It was a monumental project, something that required resources and planning on a level I had never seen before. I stood there, motionless, trying to understand what I was seeing. "What is this?" I asked, my voice coming out almost a whisper. My supervisor was next to me, and his expression remained the same, calm, almost indifferent. He looked at the tunnel as if it were something completely normal. "The fire will start inside, not in the mansion," he said, as if he was explaining something trivial. Those words hit me like a punch. A fire? Inside? Under the mansion? I looked at him, waiting for him to say more, but he didn't seem interested in giving me answers. Instead, he turned to the group and gave clear orders. "Get in the truck. Let's go down." What? Did he expect us to drive into that tunnel? Everything inside me screamed not to do this. My instinct, my training, everything told me that it wasn't safe, that it didn't make sense. But the authority in his voice made me hesitate. He wasn't asking, I was ordering. I got into the truck with my hands shaking, the steering wheel seeming to slip through my fingers because I was sweating so much. My colleagues were silent, their expressions reflecting the same mix of fear and confusion that I felt. As I started the engine, my supervisor stood next to the tunnel entrance, staring into the darkness as if it held secrets only he knew. "Go ahead," he said, gesturing for me to come forward. Driving into that tunnel was like crossing into another world. The artificial light seemed so precise, so calculated, that it made the space seem almost unreal. It was big, bigger than any underground tunnel I had ever seen. The walls and floor were spotless, as if they had never been used, and as we went deeper, the silence around us felt heavier, as if the air within had its own density. The tunnel seemed to have no end. I couldn't understand what a place like that was doing there, under a mansion. Who would have the resources and audacity to build something like this? And, more importantly, why? I looked at my colleagues, but no one spoke. It was like we were all trying to process the same thought. What the hell is going on here? As we drove the truck through the tunnel, the feeling of surrealism only increased. With each turn, the structure seemed to expand. It wasn't just a tunnel. It was a work of engineering so impressive that it didn't seem possible to exist beneath a simple mansion. The walls glowed softly, emitting a constant light, and the air inside was heavy, filled with a strange energy that seemed to press against my chest. Finally, we stopped in front of a room. The man guiding us through the tunnel signaled us to go down. At this point, my thoughts were in a whirlwind. Why were we there? What was that place? And most disturbingly, why did my supervisor seem to act like everything was completely normal? When we entered the room, the first thing I noticed was how ordinary, almost disappointing, it seemed at first glance. It was small, with walls covered in symbols that I couldn't recognize and full of scattered boxes and papers. But as I looked closer, I realized that nothing there was really normal. The boxes were full of documents, photos, and objects that didn't make sense. My gaze fixed on the photographs. They were images of Diddy, but not the ones you find on the internet or in magazines. They were strange photos, capturing moments that seemed private, intimate. He stood next to celebrities, important figures, people anyone would recognize. But there was something about those photos, something about the way they were taken and organized, that made me uneasy. It was as if they had been taken for a purpose I couldn't understand. Before I could explore further, the men who had entered with us began to act. Without saying a word, they began to pour oil on everything. The walls, the boxes, the papers, even the photographs. The smell was overpowering, and the purpose was obvious. They were going to burn everything. I looked at my supervisor, searching for answers. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. He gave me an almost paternal look, as if he were explaining something obvious to a child. "This room has things that shouldn't be there. We're here to make sure no one ever finds out about them." Those words fell like a stone in my stomach. What were these things? Why shouldn't they exist? And more importantly, who had decided this? My supervisor seemed completely at ease, as if this operation was just another ordinary day at work. As I was processing all of this, one of the men lit a match. Within seconds, the room turned into a ball of fire. The heat was intense, and I could barely breathe. Everything that was in that room, the documents, the photos, the symbols, was being consumed by the flames. It was no ordinary fire. It was a deliberate burning, a complete cleansing of something no one should see. "What's all this for?" I insisted, almost shouting to be heard over the roar of the flames. My supervisor responded with the same disconcerting calm. "It's because Diddy could use that information. It's better that it disappears." I stood there, paralyzed, watching the fire consume everything. It wasn't just objects being destroyed. It was as if a part of the truth was being erased, deliberately removed from the world. And the worst of all? I didn't know if I wanted to understand what was happening or if I would rather never find out. When the fire finally subsided, the room was unrecognizable. Everything that had been there before, the papers, the photos, the symbols, was now nothing more than ash and soot. The floor was covered in a fine layer of black dust, and the walls that were once marked with symbols were now charred. It was as if that place had never existed. I looked around, trying to find some trace, some clue that would explain what we had just done, but there was nothing, just silence and destruction. My supervisor, however, seemed completely at ease. He approached me with that same calm, distant look from before. "Job well done," he said, as if it were all routine. I couldn't accept it. I couldn't just let it go. "Who is behind this?" I asked, my voice thick with frustration and confusion. He looked at me for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. Then, with a serious expression, he replied, "This is bigger than you imagine. There are people, important people, who don't want certain things to come to light. It's not our job to question. Our job is to make sure this stays buried." I was astonished. Important people? Who? How is this possible? He sighed, as if he was already used to these questions. "I don't know all the details," he said, finally showing a small sign of hesitation. "But all this is for the big boss." The big boss. This phrase kept echoing in my head. "Who is this big boss?" I asked, almost begging for an explanation. "He is above everything," he replied. "Above the president, above justice, above the police. He controls everything. And this," he pointed to the ashes on the floor, "is just a small part of what he does." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was as if I had stumbled upon a conspiracy theory, but my supervisor's tone was so serious, so assured, that it was impossible to ignore. Before I could ask any more questions, he looked at his watch and said, "We need to go. The longer we stay here, the riskier it gets. They'll start asking questions." "Who are they?" I asked, my voice now lower, almost a whisper. He didn't respond. He just gave me a look that said it all. I shouldn't keep asking. As we walked back through the tunnel, my heart was heavy. Who were these people? How could someone have so much power, so much control, that even such a huge secret could be erased without a trace? And most frightening of all, what was the true purpose of this fire? Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about Diddy or his mansion. It was something much bigger, something I might never fully understand. When we got back to the barracks, the weight of what had happened seemed to cling to my body like a second skin. I sat in the usual seat, but nothing felt the same. My head was spinning, trying to put together the pieces of that puzzle that there seemed to be no solution. Everything, the tunnel, the room, the fire, was too big, too confusing, and to make matters worse, there was no one I could trust to share it. In an attempt to distract myself, I opened my cell phone. But as soon as I joined a social network, my heart froze. There it was, in the first posts, videos, photos, and comments about Diddy's mansion. Dramatic headlines said the property had been destroyed by fire. Others said it was a lie, that nothing had happened. The confusion was already in place. Some people had supposed proof that the fire was real. Others had evidence to the contrary. It was complete chaos, and I didn't know how to react. The only thing I knew was that, somehow, this was part of the plan. I remembered my supervisor's words. "The online world is dumb. They will argue among themselves, get lost in theories. In the end, the truth doesn't matter, only what they believe." He was right. While people fought over whether the mansion was intact or not, what really mattered, that tunnel, that room, and whatever the big boss's purpose was buried beneath the confusion. I kept scrolling, reading the comments. People were so busy debating and trying to prove their sides that no one seemed to notice the bigger picture. It was exactly what they wanted: distraction, doubt, chaos. And the more I read, the more I realized that the truth would never have a chance to come out. Because, as my supervisor had said, anyone who tried to go too far would be discredited, made a target of public scorn. I wondered if I should try to tell what I saw, try to make people understand what really happened down there. But my supervisor's voice echoed in my mind. Go ahead, tell the world. No one will believe you. And deep down, I knew he was right. Who would believe such an absurd story? A mansion with an underground tunnel, a planned fire, a room full of intentionally burned secrets. It was the stuff of a movie, not reality. As I put the cell phone aside, something inside me changed. I realized that the fire that night wasn't about Diddy, or his mansion, or even what was in the room. It was about control, about manipulating what people believe. And the scary thing is that they had succeeded. They had turned a strange and dark event into a mess of theories and lies, erasing any chance of anyone finding out what really happened. I felt a chill. This wasn't just an isolated operation, it was a system. And I knew that if I tried to oppose him, I would end up swallowed up in the same game. In the end, that's what they wanted, to keep us distracted, divided, confused. And the truth, that truth that I saw so clearly in that burning room, would remain buried. As much as I tried to push these thoughts away, one question persisted in my mind. What else is being hidden from us? And worse, will we ever have the chance to find out? After that night, everything changed for me. It wasn't just about what I had seen, but about what it represented. The mansion, the tunnel, the burning room, it all seemed a symbol of something much bigger. Something I never imagined possible. The truth being erased right in front of us, while we are distracted by carefully crafted lies. I stayed awake that whole night, reliving every detail. I remembered my supervisor's words about the big boss, about how he was above everything, controlling not only events but also narratives. Who was he? How could someone have so much power? And how could we, ordinary people, even begin to understand or face something like this? In an attempt to disconnect, I logged into social media again, and what I saw only confirmed everything. Videos and posts about the mansion were multiplying, with people furiously arguing about what was real and what was fake. Some swore that the mansion had been completely destroyed. Others claimed that there wasn't even a fire. Crazy theories were emerging every minute, and no one could agree on anything. It was like controlled chaos, the kind of confusion that prevents anyone from seeing the truth. And then, I realized, that was the point. It didn't matter what actually happened that night. All that mattered was creating enough noise so no one could find out. It was a game, a theater, and we were the distracted spectators, too busy fighting among ourselves to notice who was pulling the strings. I wanted to believe that, in time, someone would find the truth, that somehow, amidst the chaos, people would realize what was happening. But a part of me knew it wouldn't be that simple. The world is full of lies that seem like truths, and truths that are ridiculed as lies, and whoever controls the narratives controls everything. Before going to sleep, I found myself thinking, what else is being hidden from us? How many other stories, secrets, and truths are being erased, manipulated, or buried while we are distracted by the spectacle on the surface? I don't know if I will ever have answers to these questions. I don't know if anyone will. But one thing became clear to me that night. The world is not what it seems. The truth is always there, hidden, buried under layers of lies, waiting to be discovered. And maybe, just maybe, the first step to finding it is to start questioning everything, absolutely everything we are told. If you've ever felt like you were on the edge of something you couldn't understand, tell me in the comments. I want to know what you think about this. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss stories like this. Until next time, and remember, stay curious, stay safe.